Welcome to episode number 158 of the Girls for Greatness podcast. I am your host, Delia Perry, and let me first and foremost just thank you all for listening in today. It is such an honor to have you all here. And let me tell you, you are all in for a treat because I am talking today with someone who, in my mind, is a shining example to other women and girls. Today, I am talking with Rupali Chandar, someone I first connected with at a mutual friend's home about, I think Rupali, wasn't it like 2 years ago? I want to say it was like 2 years ago. Yeah. So I think it was pre-pandemic. I feel like it's all run together in some ways, but I think it was right around that time. And we actually had the opportunity of connecting again fairly recently at an event at a local high school. Where we were both asked to be speakers. So I was so excited to see that Rupali was there. It took me a minute to kind of put two and two together that we had met prior, but just hearing what she had to say, I knew that she was someone that I definitely wanted to have on the podcast. And to give you guys a little bit of a background, Rupali has has been a professor of astrophysics at the University of Toledo since 2007. She is currently the associate chair of the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and Rupali is leading a team of international scientists studying the most extreme star-forming galaxies in the nearby universe. Rupali got her PhD from Johns Hopkins, and she also has a double major in physics and astronomy from Haverford College. Did I say that right? Haverford? Haverford. Okay. I cannot wait, you guys, for you to hear from Rupali and to just dive into all the amazing things she's up to, what she's done, and how she is truly being an example to so many women out there to step into their own power. So Rupali, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So obviously I said you're in Toledo at the university. And so we're actually, obviously, as you all can gather, live in very close proximity to one another. But maybe you could just start off by telling us a little about how you got into the field you're into. I mean, was that something like as far as like space and stars that you were always into as a kid? And what led you into that field of astrophysics?
So I think, like a lot of kids, I fell in love with space when I was in fourth grade. So I think in Ohio and a lot of other places, solar system, right?
Yep.
And when we were growing up, there was no internet. So the only way you had, besides like in class, was to go and look at the encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going and reading about how did the solar system form? Like, wait, what? There's more than planet Earth? Like, this is mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so from there, I just fell in love with space. It just was so big and unimaginable and touched on like all those questions you have as a kid, like, what is my place? Why am I here? You know, what else is out there? And so I fell in love with black holes. I found books going to the library, and I read about whatever I could find on black holes. You know, I didn't know at the time, I didn't know for a long time that you could be an astronomer or an astrophysicist as a career. That no one ever told me that. And so I didn't know that until I went to college. And then I had these amazing professors, and one of the best teachers in my life I encountered at Haverford College. And it was because of that class that I'm like, you know what, this is it. This is what I want to do. If I can get paid to study the universe, I'm going to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. And so I double majored in physics and in astronomy. And it was, I mean, I loved my classwork. It was really challenging. One of the weirdest things was that I was usually the only woman in my class, in all of my classes.
Wow. Wow. I have to ask you this though. Did you ever think as a kid, was your first initial thought ever that you wanted to be an astronaut, that you wanted to go into space?
I'm terrified of flying. That was
Really
definitely out
interesting.
of my
I mean, because usually when you hear of a kid that's like obsessed with, the solar system or planets or stars or astronomy, I mean, that might be like their first inclination is, oh my gosh, I want to travel to space. But that's
totally.
that's funny.
Yep. No, okay. So I will say this. I hope some of you want to go to Mars. I will help you get there, but I am not the one that's going to
Like, you're like, I'll study it from afar, but I don't need to go.
go.
That's funny. That's funny. So tell me about, like you just said, so you get to college and you're in these classes and you're primarily the only woman. Um, was that difficult for you? Like, did you feel like you were the outsider, that you didn't fit in? I mean, were professors, did they think like play you down? I mean, compared to the men in your class? I mean, I'm just curious how that whole process was for you.
Um, there were parts that were definitely really daunting. Um,
Mm,
I will say in undergrad, I was super lucky. I had incredible professors who treated me just like everyone else.
mm,
Um, the daunting part was, usually you have study groups, and
mm,
the only people I could have study groups with were the men in my classes. And um, this is, I think, a pretty common theme that
mm,
I wish I'd known then, that I learned about later. Um, in those kinds of situations, often women develop something called imposter syndrome.
mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, but somehow, at least for my classes, men spoke about their abilities. And I mean, they just had a confidence that I didn't feel, at least the way they came off. And so I thought I was just the dumbest one in the class. That was just my read of the
Sure.
situation. Um, it took me years to find out and learn that no, actually I was like at the top of the class, but the feeling that their confidence really made me feel like I did not know what I was doing. The material is always hard. I was really
Mm,
struggling. I didn't realize they were also struggling because of the way they talked about it.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine that would be a very real thing, especially in that field. And like you said, just it being as difficult as it was. I mean, I can't even imagine. I struggled with just the normal sciences, so I can't imagine those sciences. But um, how did you kind of move past that? I mean, was it just a thing that you figured out? You figured out how to make your way through the classes, and you like had success, so that kind of breeded the fact in your mind, like, hey, I can do this. I can achieve and do just as much as anyone else in this class.
I think there were a couple of factors that were really important. Um, One is that there was this group that I joined that was basically women in science.
Mm,
Most of the women were not in physics, but they
mm-hmm.
were in other sciences, right? They were in chemistry, biology,
Sure.
and that support group.
Mm,
And honestly, like being able to talk about, well, someday I want to get married and have kids. How am I going to do that with a career? Just having like a group of women to talk
mm,
to about those
sure.
things was so important. And I think that support structure that I think had been started by women in science in my college earlier, and they had just sort of kept it going. And then when I was a senior, then I trained and talked to and had younger um, women scientists coming up. So hopefully that's still going. That was really important.
Sure.
Having those safe spaces where you can get that support that you need.
I think that brings a great point. I mean, the whole idea of community that I think we so often underplay. And I mean, even now as, you know, older women and, having kids. And I mean, I think it can still, as many opportunities as we might think we have, I think it's really easy to self isolate and to think, I don't need anyone. I can figure this out on my own. And I mean, that just brings up a great point that there's so much power in community and when you feel like you have a place to voice your concern or to voice the way you're feeling. So,
And I think it's necessary. I found that again when I went to Hopkins for my PhD.
mm,
Um, that was Hopkins at the time was only 10% of the undergrads were women. I was the only one in my class. It was a big class. It was 20 plus students. And
Wow.
so it was hardcore. It was a joint physics and astronomy program. So my PhD is actually in astrophysics. And they were really, they had the mentality of weeding you out. So the first 2 years at Johns Hopkins were the most academically challenging and rigorous experiences I've ever had. And there was a women's group in the department, and just knowing and feeling that support, right?
Yeah.
Not competition, but support. With the
Right.
guys, it was competition. With the women, it was support. And that was huge. I didn't realize how impactful that was and how important it was
Yeah.
for my career until later.
Wow. Did you feel like entering, the PhD program that you were accepted maybe more so? I mean, just being the fact that you had made it that far, that you had gotten into that program, that you were there. I mean, to me, I would feel like, I would A, be proud of that, but B, start to feel like, I'm just as worthy of being here as anyone else, man or woman. Especially if it was that small of numbers of people that got into that actual program.
Um, I I wish that had been the case, but Hopkins Hopkins
It
was
was
another.
tough.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was, you got to prove yourself. And I do think that at the time the environment was, um, and people even said, "Oh, we only got in because you're a woman," and that was
Oh,
extra burden, right? And like, well, now I really have to prove, for not just for
sure.
myself but my gender, that we belong here.
Sure. Sure. What was the most rigorous part to you looking back on that time? Like, what was the most difficult
It
piece
was
of it all?
just it was just incredibly challenging material,
Mm,
and a lot of it put into 2 years. And the thing that I found as an undergrad, you think I would have learned about the
mm-hmm,
mismatch between confidence and ability,
mm-hmm.
from the guys. It was like amped up even another level, right? So
Wow.
like that imposter syndrome that had kind of already started and taken hold
Yeah.
went kind of crazy those first 2 years.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm curious, what did your family, how was that support wise? Like, I mean, just they obviously knew that you were from a young age into this field. And was that something that they encouraged? Were they like, you go, you got this. This is amazing.
It was mixed. My
Yeah.
dad was fully 100% behind it. My mom wasn't not quite sure why.
Yeah.
She struggled with that. I remember passing my exams, and once you pass all of your exams, written and oral, you get a master's.
Mm,
And I called my parents and said, "Hey, passed all my exams. I got my master's." My mom's like, "Oh, thank God, now you can stop." She's
wow.
like, "You're done." And I'm like, "No, mama, I'm
Yeah.
not done." Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Amazing. Amazing. So you obviously finished those degrees and then ended up, continuing to work in the field. Did you go right into being a professor after you were done, or did you do like spend time in research? Because I know you do research now as well. So I'm curious how that's all come together.
So the way it works in astro is, and in physics, and I think a little bit in chemistry, you don't usually move straight to a faculty job.
Okay.
There's additional training. So I had a couple postdocs.
Mm,
Um, I spent 3 years at the Space Telescope Science Institute, which runs the Hubble Space Telescope,
wow.
and that was a incredible. That was like a great, great place to be a postdoc. Lots of
Mm,
energy. It was awesome, and that's where I had my two kids. Um,
okay.
and then I was, and that's still in Baltimore. And then I went to the West Coast, um, to Carnegie Observatories in Pasadena for a
Wow.
year, and then I came to the heartland, to back to Ohio. Um,
Amazing.
so yeah, so I got to experience different settings and institutions. It was I mean, it worked out really well. It's a little stressful when you have to move your family around.
Sure. Sure. Did you come back to the area because that's where you were originally from?
Oh no, I came back because I got a job offer.
Okay. Got it.
So you don't usually get to pick.
Gotcha.
You go where you get the
Where you
job.
get the job. Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I can only imagine how awesome those other experiences were in your career before getting to where you're at now. How has it been? I know there's some other things in terms of women that I want to dive into, but how has it been for you, Polly? Like, I guess juggling everything with between, career, being a mom, being a wife, and then also my other question around that is, you obviously have daughters, and how have you kind of, I guess, worked on just shaping them, molding them into, the women that they are, in terms of just saying, I mean, because we are a shining example just as being in the fields you're at and being the mother you are. But I'm saying, like, just in terms of empowering them to move into
Right.
whatever they're into.
Right. So for juggling, I mean, we all figure it out in our own
Right.
way, right? There is no formula. And I had, for me personally, there were some really hard times, I think, after the kids were born. It was definitely an issue in my scientific community. I was told I had ruined my career when I got pregnant the first time, and the second time, the fact that I dared to get pregnant again was really not, people were not very happy. And the thinking there, I can unpack it, is, Johns Hopkins and your advisor have put so much energy and grant funding into your career. And now by having children, you've basically derailed that. You're not going to be able to be a faculty member because of the loss of time and energy and distractions. And so you've basically just thrown all of those resources away. And so that was sort of the thinking. Yeah. And I will say that is from my advisor. I have been one of the best things, I think, for my career. I have had incredible mentors.
Sure.
And every advisor and supervisor I have had, who've all been men, by the way, and that is an important part of this story, have been so supportive. It was the women a few women who were really unhappy with me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
But I get it. And here's why. They gave up everything for their careers. They gave up family. They gave up children. They gave their significant others were across the country. And so my thinking on that is that I give them a huge amount of credit. They are the ones who, going from a time when women were not allowed to get their PhDs, literally prohibited from getting a PhD, right? Slowly, they somehow managed to pull that door open a little bit and get through I can't even imagine how challenging it must have been for them. And to end up as faculty and build their careers, right? So they opened the door enough for people like me to come through. And my generation, in fact, I understand more, the women there were a handful of women in the community who had kids, but they all had them after tenure, so around 40. So they waited a long time, and they only had one, mostly. So they were, it was just like, it wasn't a thing that was done. And so I understand their alarm and concern.
Sure.
But knowing where I am now, I am so thankful for what they have done for me. They opened that door, and I feel like I can take my experiences, and now that I am where I am, I have influence, and I feel like it's really important for me to pull that door open further.
Sure.
So that motherhood in astrophysics and physics is normalized. It's not a crime, right? It's actually a benefit.
That's true. Did you even, as you were going through schooling and your PhD, did you ever stop to think like, well, I want a family and how am I going to balance this? Or, or did you think, well, I'm not going to have kids and then you changed your mind? Or, I'm just curious because I think a lot of women, young girls who are even entering the sciences. I mean, I've even had, those thoughts. My husband's in medicine, and, he's said, it's extremely difficult for any woman that goes into those fields because I think they feel that pull of, I've worked so hard at getting to where I'm at in my career and, going through all of these years and years of schooling and training but yet I do want a family. And I think, you see that and maybe is becoming more of the norm, but I still think it's a huge question and a huge, maybe even deterrent for some girls to think, well, I can't go into that field because it's going to, cost so much money and I'm going to go through all these years and I'm not going to, have anything to show for it. I mean, I even felt that to a degree, just going through 4 years of college and being in a field and then stepping away and having those thoughts of, oh, did I just waste an entire 4 years of education? So I'm just curious what your take is and how that was for you, that whole process.
So since I was young, a little kid, right, I knew there were two things that I wanted for my life. My two big life goals were kids and a career that I loved. So I was never willing to sacrifice having a family. And that was where some people were not very happy with me when I was at Hopkins. But I think the way I approach it and the way that I tell my friends and my younger colleagues and my kids is you get to succeed on your own terms. Do not let anyone else tell you or define success for you. And so for me, success meant having the family that I'd always wanted. And no one could tell me otherwise. So that was a really, really important part of the story, I think, for me. And having a supportive partner, knowing that up front, right? Before I got married, like it was very well known that my career and having a family were the two most important things, and we were going to figure it out. And so we did. There wasn't a roadmap there, but I think having that, knowing that those are the things you want, and that you can always make another decision, you can always sort of figure it out, especially if you're open and willing to be creative. That was really empowering. It worked. It really worked. I just, when people were, and again, I was very lucky. My direct supervisors, all men, very, very supportive. And, that's another takeaway. Take the support you can get. And in my field, when there weren't women around to be those mentors, I found them in the men who were leaders in the field. So that was really impactful and helpful. They were so supportive of me having a family, so supportive of my family and science. So I feel like it did all work out, and having that mindset of I'm going to define success for myself and no one else gets to do that has been really important.
That's awesome. I love that. Succeeding on your own terms. What a great message to, not only impart to our kids, but to, women in general, because I think so many times, one of the things I talk a lot about on here is the fact that we have this incessant need, and I'm just as much to blame at times for feeling like we have to apologize for the decisions that we make and the things that we decide for ourselves, for our family, for the way that we do our business or our careers or whatever it is. And I think a lot of that is because we're so quick to judge. I mean, I've been there too, but to also feel like we have, some standard or some, way that it's always been done. And if we deviate from that, then we're in the wrong. And, I always, say this on here, you have to really, it's not easy, but, you have to really embrace that idea of this is your life. This is the way you want to do things. And it's really important that you move forward with things in your own way.
Exactly. And the world needs that. The world doesn't need
Yes.
just people following along a predetermined path.
Yes. Yes.
I think the world needs all of these individual paths, right?
Yeah.
And to me, one of the most important things that we can do as women, and if this is, I think this is the message I give my kids, boys and girls, and my friends. Pick your path, right? Stick to it. No, you might make mistakes. That's okay. You can always correct. You can always make another decision. And the corollary of that is do not judge other people's. Support all of your friends' decisions, even when you think they're making a mistake.
So true. That's so true. That's such great advice. I love that. So tell us a little about what you're doing now. I mean, I know you're on a sabbatical, right? So you're not teaching, and we kind of talked a little bit about that, but what are you excited about now in your field, and how has that all kind of changed? And I know you have, kids in college and kids in high school and middle school. So how is it going, and what are you excited about in terms of your career now?
So I'm in the middle of sabbatical right now, and it has been awesome. It feels like we are, and I think it's probably safe to say astronomy is entering a new kind of golden age. The Hubble Space Telescope, even though it's 30 plus years old, it's still working. It's still taking incredible data. Still also very hard to get time on it.
Yeah.
Same time, the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the next great space telescope and NASA mission, it launched on Christmas morning, which was that was like a fantastic Christmas.
Yeah.
It is all been unfurled. It's the largest thing ever put into space, right? And so because it's so big, it had to be all kind of curled up and folded. I think there are almost 150 specific individual pieces or movements that had to happen exactly right.
Wow.
That has all happened. It is working. It is taking exquisite initial data. So I will have data coming from that telescope.
That's amazing. Where is that at then?
Okay, so Hubble is in kind of a low Earth orbit because remember we've literally sent people to walk right and fix it, which was incredible
amazing
engineering. Yeah, ridiculous. We can't do that for Webb, so thank goodness it worked. It is at a point called Lagrange 2, which means it's a stable dynamical orbit for the Sun, Earth, Moon system, and it is beyond the Moon. So it's really, really far away.
Wow. And it was just like, is it like, how is it like, is it on is it just taking picture and bringing in data and then it's somehow run back to?
Yeah, they will. It takes the observations, right? The way it works is that there are proposals, right? The entire world community can actually propose to observe. And so
amazing.
Through peer review, like I got this proposal accepted, right? And they have software, you learn how to use it, you code it up, and then your program, is basically going to control the telescope for that amount of time to get the data, and then come back down to Earth.
Amazing. Phenomenal. Wow, that's impressive. So you've been honing in on that during your time? Yeah. Okay.
Finishing off some papers and getting ready for the new data.
That's amazing. So what do you teach at UT? What do you teach specific different classes, obviously, but what are your classes that you?
I teach like from the undergrad, the introductory undergraduate level for usually starting at majors, all the way through the senior level undergrad major. And then I also teach at the grad level.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. And it's, I do teach some things on the solar system. I do not know much about the solar system. But my research is mainly on galaxies, and galaxies, meaning outside of our own Milky Way. And so that's what the data I have. Well, it's on a really cool pair of galaxies. And that's my favorite part to teach, is just about galaxies.
That's awesome. And you can be an example to so many, I'm sure, of the women in your classes. I mean, I'm sure you've run across many who are, want to hone in on that field. And, you can say, I went here, I did this, and,
And they can see a path.
Yes.
Really important. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, my last two questions, before I kind of wrap things up, tell me, Rupali, 3 words that best describe who you really and truly are. It doesn't have to be a phrase. It can just be like 3 separate words.
3 separate words. That is a really hard question. The hardest one you've asked. Let's see. 3 separate words. Compassionate. Skeptical. That's where the science comes from.
Love that.
And curious.
Great words. Great words. And my last question is, how do you embody greatness?
That's a hard one too. I think, so I'm going to answer it this way. I feel like my biggest legacy, if I can think of it or say it that way, is my kids. And so I'm going to cycle back to the question you asked earlier, right? About having daughters and how do you set them up for success? And I'm going to include the boys in that equation because interestingly, both of my girls are very scientifically minded, as are the boys, maybe not that surprisingly. And the way that their brothers talk about their sisters, right? The way that Max and Quentin talk about Maya and Eleonora with so much respect and love, and how just blown away they are by their sisters' accomplishments and character. That to me is kind of my greatest legacy, to have helped raise kids who see the world that way.
That's awesome.
And I'm getting emotional. Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. Rupali, thank you so much for sharing that. That is an amazing legacy, and, truly remarkable that, you've passed along that mindset. And I think that's so important in our world, to have that outlook of acceptance and, tolerance and, just acknowledgement for what we can do as a human being, no matter if we are a man or a woman. And I just thank you so much for being here. Thank you for, sharing your heart. And I think your example, like I said, is just so empowering to so many. And I just loved what you've shared about your career and how you've, been able to be such an example to everyone else around you, and to just have that forward thinking, which I think is so, so remarkable. So thank you so much for taking time to be here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for asking some hard questions.
You're so welcome.
It was great chatting with you.